Welcome to For the Love of Books, Bees Books Edition, a podcast by North Lanarkshire Libraries.
Hello, this is Pari.
And this is Jenny, and we're here to talk about
Bees Books. Are we here to talk about Bees Books? Because it feels like it was ages ago. I think that time, Christmas, New Year time, just expands and contracts in weird ways.
Absolutely.
So I've forgotten how to podcast. I don't know how to podcast
I think
anymore.
we'll just chat. We'll pick it up.
Okay, I might give like silent black looks or just lots
Yeah.
of visual cues,
No,
and you'll
that's
be like, this is an audio medium.
However, I should warn people that I'm a bit snuffly today
Oh.
and a bit croaky, so I apologise.
Lovely. It'll be like, it'll add texture, I
Yes.
think.
Green gooey texture, lovely.
Which will go perfectly with this week's theme, which is light and dark and like
Yes.
some green goo in the middle. It's just adding that je ne sais quoi.
Absolutely.
to
I
it.
think I enjoyed our conversation about muffins and croissants, amalgamated rather than...
Yeah.
Yes.
Which was pre-recording.
It was.
Like we just talk about baked goods
Yeah.
basically.
However, did everybody know about cruffins? Am I the last one to know about this kind of...
I feel like it was a recent discovery of mine. For those who don't know, it's essentially a croissant shaped. I like saying croissant.
Yes.
Shaped like a muffin. So there's no muffin involved except for its design, but it is more delicious than either a croissant or a muffin. It's the best of both worlds, and it's
It's like
fantastic.
a labradoodle.
Ah.
It's a mixture between an M.
It's taking two great things and making them perfect. So it's really good. So the next time the local bakery does a raspberry croissant, I will get you one.
Nice.
Yeah.
Thank you very
So hopefully
much.
that'll help with the green gooishness.
Yes, it will. Anyway, I suppose we should actually get on with talking
I
about
guess.
Dark. I think Bee's given us a wee frown there. So
Yeah. Well, I feel like I liked the theme because it was broad enough.
it was.
To like, I guess, interpret it differently, but I've interpreted it in a very specific way for both my selections.
Okay.
I could have been creative, but I was,
Not.
I kind of was, I guess.
Oh.
So my first book is the first in a series. It's called Midnight at Malabar House by Wasim Khan. And the tagline is "Murder can divide a nation," which sounds really...
I have
Yes.
seen this book and I've never, so I'm interested to...
So I
find
didn't
out.
actually this book has completely passed me by, but it was a patron who'd come in and returned the third book in the series, which had like Bombay in the title, and I was immediately hooked because I'm from Bombay, and I was like, "Ooh, a murder mystery set in Bombay!" But then I realized this is the first book, and this sort of building that you see here is quite an iconic structure in the city as well. So I guess I could have recognized it, but I just don't imagine mysteries written in Bombay. So this was really good.
I like as well in front it says historical crime fiction at its sharpest.
Well, I'll talk about
okay.
it more. But sure. And my second book is this book of essays that another patron has very rudely requested a copy of. So I had to like rush through reading this. I'm still 5 days late, but it's a fantastic book. It's called Magical Realism, Essays on Music, Memory, Fantasy and Borders by Vanessa Angelica Villarreal. I think that's how you say her name. And I loved this book. This book I have mixed feelings on. The first one, it's a kind of book that I think I should love. But this book I unapologetically
So
love.
I'm seeing the midnight ones, possibly your dark.
Oh, well, in both these books, so I should explain why I chose this. So at Midnight at Malabar House, I think, so it's set just after independence, Indian independence, and like just sort of after the spectre of partition and things. So it's still like a tumultuous, uncertain time in India. So, the light is independence. We've removed the shackles of empire. The dark is, well, the murder, but also just the social and political landscape, because people are still not really trusting of different cultures, different religions, and there's still a lot of and of British people as well, like the British people who are still left in India. There's different kinds of relationships. So it's like, I guess, something that should be like you'd think, happy independence, is much like more complicated than that. Whereas this, so it's like a series of essays, magical realism, But it looks at pop culture, it looks at music like Beyonce and Nirvana and things, looks at video games, Witcher and some other stuff, Skyrim and things, fantasy, Game of Thrones, like things that she reads. But she's writing this as a way to kind of deal with her trauma and grief.
Oh.
So like
There's the darkness right there.
Yeah,
Okay.
and so it's like stuff that would, you know, bring a lot of joy to people, I guess. I mean, Game of Thrones, I guess the last season did bring a lot of joy to many people. I was not one of them. I loved the season. But it's like an interesting blend of like personal, like memoir, but also cultural criticism and academic scholarship a bit as well, and like political stuff, because she's like a Mexican immigrant in the US, so with all the stuff that's going on there. So it's not a difficult book. It is kind of difficult because she writes about a lot of like traumatic things that have happened in her own life, from her childhood to like her marriage falling apart and things. But it's also difficult in some of the ideas that she makes connections to. But if you give it a chance, she's a really good guide through the ideas. So she writes very accessibly, and she uses like very deliberately pop culture like as sort of this accessible language to make these ideas more.
The cover is very pretty.
It's a fantastic book. Like, I don't know that you'd like it necessarily, but I mean, I wish that because like it is a bit too difficult, I think, for people who don't like non-fiction anyway, and you're like very side-eye about non-fiction. But I think for people who are into non-fiction but who are not into like what she's writing about at all, they should give it a chance, because it's just like a really, like, I feel like I learned to look at the world a bit differently, and I love that when books do that. So fully recommend, and I guess now I'll go to this other person who's requested it.
How dare they?
Yeah.
Well, I went quite literal.
Okay.
And went down the fantasy route.
Oh, nice.
So I have a light fantasy book
Yeah. Ooh, okay.
called Rewitched by Lucy Jane Wood.
Yeah.
And I have quite a dark fantasy book called Masters of Death by Olivia Blake.
Oh.
I had to say that quite slowly.
Yeah, because that's not a name that you expect. You'd expect an Olive or an Olivia, but this is like a Cruffin.
Yes.
Taking two things together.
Yes. And the reason I chose this one to begin with, before I decided to use it for Bee's books, is because her name, and I'm not going to say it again, appeared on quite a lot of books that I had read recently.
Oh, right.
You know, there's like authors that come up and say, oh, this is the best book I've read, and you're like, I don't know who you are. So I thought, oh no, I'll give you a go, because you've recommended quite a few books that I actually quite liked. Sometimes I think it's more of a kind of publicity thing rather than they've actually read the books. But that's why I chose this one. I also have another book, which is an in-between book.
Okay, I like that. That's the
yes.
green goo in the light and dark.
And it is The Aeronauts Windlass by Jim Butcher.
Oh.
I'm hoping we'll get a chance to speak about that.
Yeah, that's
Sort of
like
sits
a
in the
striking
middle.
cover.
It is, yes.
Okay.
The other cover is much prettier though.
Oh,
yes,
right, okay.
yes. But yeah, so that's my light and my dark.
Okay.
Actually.
Well, I'll tell you a little bit, since I started talking about magical realism anyway, so just like a brief thing. So the essays, you can read them standalone as well, but I think I preferred reading them from start to finish, because one of the essays towards the end of the book I'd actually read before. I think a few weeks ago I talked about a book on video games and like critical role or something it was called, and an essay of hers was in it, and I really enjoyed spending the time because with this book now, because I learned about her life and then how that essay sort of is in conversation with other things. And then the last essay I think might have been my favorite, and not just because I finished reading it on the train just now going to work, but it reads Jon Snow, Game of Thrones, and like the Game of Thrones world as this allegory for Mexican-US relations. So the wall in Game of Thrones as the wall between Mexico and the US, and the wildlings. I've forgotten what they're called. You know, the ones who live, the people who live. So she read herself into that, like her Latino ancestry and things. And she does such, like, that I think acts as a really good example for the rest of the book. And it's much easier, I think, than some of the other essays. So maybe if you want to give it a chance, I'd say start from the
one.
last essay, which is not like what I would usually say. But it made a really good, like I said, argument throughout. Like you could see where it was going. And she writes with, like, she's obviously really intelligent because she's making all these connections, but she writes with a lot of heart. Like she writes with a lot of passion. And the afterword ends with, like, it was like, so this, the Game of Thrones show was with her over the 10 years that she had the most sort of difficult time in her adult life. So she has a really strong connection to the show because she feels like Jon Snow like saved my life literally. And she writes with a lot of love, but then in the afterward, she ends up at a Game of Thrones fan convention, and she pays to like meet and greet, well, like a sort of thing with Kit Harington, the actor who played Jon Snow, and she really wanted to like say to him that, you know, you saved her. But she realizes that that fantasy that she'd built up in her head was not actually in reality the same way that she'd imagined it. So that kind of sort of like that barrier, because he's just a guy. He's just a guy who is acting, who's working. And she's placed all these things on him, which I think happens in fandom anyway. That it's not the creators or the actors or the writers or whatever who might mean to write about all these things. It's the readers who are reading all these things depending on who they
absolutely.
are.
We all pick up something different from TV, from books and things like that.
Like even you and I, we read like Harry Potter. Like we've read the same book at different times in our lives and we would have had different things.
Absolutely.
And if we reread them now, the books, we'd get different things out of it as well. So I like that because it like it ends with that Jon Snow essay and then it's the afterword where she writes about that Kit Harington weirdness.
It's good though that she realises that, you know, there's a lot of people nowadays that can't quite separate those two things. Yeah. You know, the kind of fantasy not quite real and the actual
Absolutely.
real.
But I think that's also because she was kind of healing from that trauma of those 10 years. So she had enough distance to like look back and assess, whereas I guess maybe some people who don't have that distance, they're still in the middle of like whatever mental connection, mental, emotional, physical sort of like thingamajig is happening. So like but you're right. I think it's like great that she realizes and articulates it because she's realizing in real time. She was writing this book when this fan convention happened, and so she's like, oh wait, I was expecting to write a very different kind of afterward and this is what happened. So it's much more uncertain, but I love how she's using fantasy in different ways. Like one of the things was a video game where she like plays through relationships in that, I think it was the Witcher game, and she's using it as almost like exposure therapy for her marriage breakdown, like and her sort of distrust of men, and she's had like really bad relationships with men before, and so she's like, you know, it's like she explains it like you have to read I think the whole thing to be able to go with her, but she does, that's what she does. Like when I say it like that, it seems like, oh, that sounds very weird, but she takes you with her and you're like, oh, that's absolutely fascinating.
It sounds as if she's found tools to help her which might not help somebody else.
Absolutely.
Or might sound weird to other people.
Absolutely.
But they've helped her and she's kind of offering that to other people and saying, you know, I found these tools, maybe you could find
your
similar
own
tools or your own tools.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially like video games. People have a certain type of like image in their head when they say, oh, a video gamer is a certain kind of person, and she had that as well until her brother said like, why don't you know, sort of try playing this, because she was a single parent, so she was only like working or like taking care of her child. So her brother like moved in to help, and he's like, you need to do something for fun, like you need to do something for yourself, and video games became that thing. So she's using like different kinds of fantasy things and songs and things to work through her own life in a very interesting way. I thought like I loved reading about it, and like you say, some people might find it weird, but some people would instantly recognize, even if it's not the same text or the same emotions, they know that, oh yes, this is what it felt like. So
it's quite interesting actually.
Very.
You always sell these books to me, Pari, and I always go, I'll give them a go, and then I go, no, it's non-fiction. No, just not going to try it.
Which is why I got like a fiction one as well. But why don't you like cleanse our non-fiction palette by talking about, do you want to go with dark or light?
I'm going to go with light first. Okay. So there seems to be quite a lot of kind of new genres at the moment coming out, and we've recently bought quite a few of them. One of them is called, now I'm going to get this wrong, romantasy, possibly.
Oh, that's the big one. The big TikTok one.
Yes, as we were talking before, this seems to... episode might have been called something different if we planned this. It's kind of fantasy and romance kind of squished in. This isn't quite in that, but that's the closest I would say this is out with just general fiction.
Yeah.
It's called Bewitched by Lucy Jane Wood, and it's a wee kind of twist on magic and things like that. So our main character, who I've immediately forgotten the name of, I will look very quickly, Belle, in her world, which is our world, if you know what I mean, but kind of side world, witches get their powers at 15.
Okay.
And at 30 they're kind of assessed, and if they are using their powers wisely, they get to keep them. If they don't, they get taken off them. So you've got 15 years to kind of suss yourself out. But of course, between 15 and 30, most people are just kind of finding themselves, let alone what they can do with any kind of magical powers. So Belle works in a bookshop. She lives with a flatmate, her best friend, and her cat, which is a familiar, but we don't kind of know that. And she hasn't really used her magic much. She just kind of, you know, during, if she's doing the housework or whatever, she'll maybe flick a finger and, you know, something will go into a drawer, or you know, yes, exactly. You know, she's got a nasty boss at the moment. You know, there's been a couple of times when she's given him a wee sore tummy, just to kind of get him out of the way so they can actually go on with work. You know, it's that kind of boss that thinks they know what they're doing and they don't. So she's 30. She gets taken to, like, I'm going to say the witch's court. It's not that, but it's like this kind of thing. And there's a kind of playback of the last 15 years, and usually, you know, there'll be like a wee kind of, in my head, it's like a big thing on the ceiling, and it'll show you like the times that she used her magic for good or for, you know, whatever. They'll say, oh, that's brilliant, you get to keep your powers, let's move on. But no, they show her video clip, and to begin with, at 15, it's like, oh, I've got these powers, you know, I'm really going to invest in this. And then there's like another kind of clip with her mum, who's also a witch, kind of doing plant stuff, I think. I might have got that wrong. And I was like, oh, that's lovely. And then, no, after that, it's basically, yes, I gave my boss a sore tummy, you know, I did this, I did that, and it's not so good.
It's all personal gain stuff.
Yeah, or just like, you know, nonsense kind of stuff. So the witch's court, as we'll call them, kind of goes, right, well, sorry, you've not used your powers for what you should be using it. You've either not used them at all, or you've kind of used them for a bit of rubbish stuff, so we're going to take them back. But they find a loophole in this. Our birthday's sort of Halloweenish, and this is a few days before, I can't remember how much before it is, but they basically give her till the end of October to find herself. So she gets a kind of you know, a wee couple of weeks where she can sort herself out.
Like a good project time.
Yes. Yeah. So she's like all gung ho about this, but she's to have like a mentor who's going to kind of guide her. And the mentor has to be somebody who wasn't at the court at that time. And there's only a few witchy people that are kind of like that. So she gets sent to this guy who's had his magic taken off him because he's apparently murdered his brother. Back in the day.
Oh wow, okay. So not like a sore tummy at all.
No, exactly. But there's a bigger story behind that, and I'll not spoil it by telling you anything.
I could tell by your wide eyes.
There's also a bit of a love interest, and again, it's nice because it's not in your face. It's kind of like, you know, she's got this kind of guy who's watching over her to check that everything's going okay. This guy isn't about to murder her, or, you know, take advantage of her magic.
That's very important,
you know, that kind
consideration for a mentor. Don't murder me.
And it's kind of, you know, there's kind of a, but he's like 200 years old or something, and she's only 30. So obviously he doesn't look 200 years old. I should establish that. However, in the background, while she's trying to like practice stuff and like get, you know, she's got like so many targets, there's stuff happening in the background, and you don't know if everything's been spoiled by the mentor or whether there's something else happening. But when she tries to do some magic, you know, bad things happen or people disappear and things like that. So somebody's out to kind of stop her getting to her targets, kind of a thing. Plus, she's still working in bookshop. She's still got this flatmate that doesn't know that she's a witch, and she's trying not to like let on. Her mum's going through some stuff as well, so she's got life happening. So basically, she's burning the candle at both ends. She's trying to do things in the evenings after work. The boss at the bookshop is kind of getting meaner and meaner. The owner of the bookshop, who is the guy's mum, basically wants Belle to take over the shop, but she's quite reluctant because she doesn't believe in herself. And that's the theme of the whole book, basically, is, you know, believe in yourself, you know, you are more than you think you are, kind of a thing. So, yes, it's fantasy, but with a bit of romance in it, but not too much romance, which is good for us. But it was a nice take on magic. I've not, you know, usually you get your powers, you know, sort of 12, 13, while you're going through that whole hormonal thing, and, you know, you're going to go bad, you're going to go good, you know, you go to school like Harry Potter. Whereas this was like, you get it at 15, and then you have to work on it. You know, you have to practice it and do good things with it. And then we're going to reassess you at 30. I quite like that kind of idea.
I wish we did that for driving licenses in the real world. Like, I feel like there would be far fewer drivers, like bad drivers in the world, if their licenses were taken away.
Yes,
at
exactly.
So that's immediately
if we could, we would do every 10 years. Just everybody gets another weekend, a refresher course, and things like that.
I feel like this book sounds great for people who maybe are not so into fantasy, and I think a lot of no, that's not true. Some romantasy is very much in the other world, like fae and things, vampires, werewolves.
Sarah J. Maas, for example.
And who is this? The recent Yarrows, Rebecca Yarrows, is like a very popular one at the moment. But this seems to be like for people who are into more about personal, like sort of development, relationships, and, you know,
it's a nice way to dip your toe in as well. If you're kind of like, oh, fantasy's not for me, you know, this is a nice kind of way of just, you know, dipping your toe in, you know, because it's not just about the magic. It is, as you say, about
like the magic is just like an add-on, but the magic could be like, in this essay collection, she was using fantasy as an allegory for real. I think people could like use your fantasy as well as an allegory for their real world troubles. Like, so magic is not magic. It could be a driving license, for example.
But I like this, that she kind of, you know, did wee kind of things, you know, with a wee kind of flick of a finger, and, you know, or a twitch of a nose, as it would be in you know, it was just like kind of wee things.
Like a domestic sort of, more domesticated magic.
It's like, I have to do the washing today, and I can't be bothered going over to the washing barrel, so I'll just, you know, hope my flatmate doesn't notice, and, you know, that kind of a thing. And my cat's my familiar, but my cat's just like a cat.
And like the magic also seems to be just one part of her life. It's not everything. Like, she still has to go through like the everyday things, like big and small. And
I think it is true, you know, between 15 and 30 you are kind of finding yourself, and all of a sudden you're 30 and you've went, what have I done? You know, I've just kind of got a job and, you know, got a flat and you know, that kind of a thing. It's quite a nice story. I quite enjoyed it. She's got another one coming out, or is just out, which I think is set in the same world, but it's different characters.
Oh, lovely.
So I'm gonna read that. But yeah, it's a kind of lighter fantasy, dip your toe in book.
An easy read as well. Well, this book is also has a bookshop. So I'll tell you just a little bit briefly about the setting. So Malabar House is like a police department in Bombay at that time, where all the misfits are thrown in together. Not even misfits. It's like people who either made a mistake or who've pissed off like one of their superiors or something. They're just like thrown here. And our protagonist is Persis Wadia, who's like this Parsi, which is one of the religions in India. Like, Bombay is really multicultural even now, and it was at that time as well. And she's the first police detective, woman police detective in India.
I was expecting that for some reason.
Well, yes, because I made no effort to So that was her. So she is there just because she's a woman,
right?
And nobody there believes that women should be police detectives.
So what year are we looking at here?
1949. So it's just like we start on New Year's Eve, 1949, and then 1950. So just on the cusp. And our Republic Day, which is when our Constitution was signed and ratified, is the 26th of January. So like independence had happened a few years ago, but the like Constitution and stuff is just about to happen. And so while she's like on midnight duty on New Year's Eve in the police station, like just like the most horrible sort of shift, graveyard shift that she's got, and she gets a call that this Englishman has been murdered, like his body has been found after his New Year's Eve party. And so she, like this sort of misfit department that's not supposed to get all the rubbish cases and things, she's like suddenly finds herself at this like really big case. And she lives in, like, the bookshop is her father's, so she lives above the bookshop, and the bookshop is like kind of like a setting as well, because she'll use it to like look up things or have like conversations and stuff, or just like there'll be like weird people who come in. There was somebody who like played a prank on her father. He has some sort of like ongoing vendetta. He does it as well. So it's like there was like I think it was it a camel or something, just like a random camel in the bookshop. I think it was a camel. So but yeah, so and she's just like what's going on? Oh, don't worry about it. It was just that guy. So just like odd things like this, but in the background, partition has just happened, which was like a deeply traumatic thing that at that time, but even like for a lot of people now, which is it got divided into India and Pakistan, and Muslims in India, like a lot of them moved to Pakistan, and a lot of Hindus in Pakistan moved to India, and like about 2 million people were killed, like women, men, children, really brutally. And so it's still in the aftermath of that a little bit. So she finds out that this guy who was murdered had been given a secret task to like investigate the partition things, like murders and things, and like bring people to justice, because it's still like a new country. Like India is thousands of years old, but the Republic of India is pretty new, just like after independence. So she's like having to find out, was it that got it, or was it like something else, something more personal? So she's like trying to find out about him and his house and his relationships, and there's lots of like red herrings. So like in terms of a mystery, it worked, I think, like quite well. And it was really interesting to me because I read a lot of British mysteries. So I loved reading, and like I have like now sort of like familiarity with British things, but it's still pretty like exotic to me because I'm like from India. So like all these things that you take for granted, manor houses and like whatever, I'm like, oh yeah, now I know, I'm comfortable with this, but it's actually alien. Whereas this, it was all in like, I grew up in the city, so all the things that he is writing about, and I was like, oh my god, this is so cool. It's such a different way of reading a mystery.
I still feel as though there is a big however.
There is a however, because I think like, I feel like the writing is quite flat. Like it's not like a big sort of however, but it is like the character, like she herself was really annoying to me because she like in a way that I don't think is for her fictional fault. I think it's the writers is like trying to make her out to be a particular thing, but it's not. Like she keeps like doing stupid things, and as in like she gets angry because she's out to prove herself, right? Like, which I understand, like she's a woman in a man's world, but it's very much like I was reading a review which said that it seems like a man's idea of a strong female character. So she's not behaving, because it's like a man who's written her, and she's not behaving in the way that a woman would in that situation. She's behaving how a man would in that situation, which is also understandable in a male-dominated field, I guess, as it was the police force. But it just like for example, in the end, what was supposed to be this big secret, she finds out a lot of secrets of all the different suspects. And in the end, like, you know, she doesn't keep that secrecy. Like, she just announces everybody's secrets to everyone. And I was like, how does that work? Like, as a police woman who's supposed to be this rising star. And it's also like a lot of information that I knew about already. Like because obviously I grew up learning Indian history and things. I feel like it might be a barrier, although it does have really good reviews on Goodreads. It might be a barrier to someone who's not accustomed to that history, who doesn't know that history so much, that you'd have to work extra hard to like stick with it, because it's not written in like a fun, not a fun way, it's a really terrible part of history, but it's not written in like an engaging way. I feel like it's written in a very dry way, which is really sad for a mystery where, you know, it's like a murder mystery and like, so I think he tries to do a lot.
Is it the author's first book?
It's not.
Oh.
Yeah. So he's written like
I was trying to give him like a
yeah. And like I suppose it might work for some people because it's very much like a procedural. So it's like where like the mystery works as a mystery works. She's finding things out. So like I guess if you ignore the flaws, you can stick. And I feel like I am going to stick with it.
You're going to read the second one.
For at least the second one, just because I feel like for me the pros outweigh the cons, just because I loved reading a mystery set in India and taking a lot of the historical elements in it that I know but don't know so well. So he's done a bit of research and he's like bringing that into a story, which is always fun. So for me, and like because I've not been back home in like 7 years now, it's like getting to know Bombay again, like at a different time period. But it's like going home again almost. So I really like that part. I was like, oh my god, I know this, and like the memories and stuff. But the character and the relationships, there's also like a British forensic scientist, Archie Blackfinch. Yeah, so both of them, there's a bit of a romance developing there, and they're like working together as well, like so her. But even that feels very, I don't know, it doesn't feel like it's drawn out. Like it feels like he's much more passionate about the mystery than the characters, and he's like passionate about maybe this writing about Bombay, because he's British Pakistani but he lived in India apparently for 10 years, and I'm assuming in Bombay because that's what he writes about. So I feel like he's more passionate about that, and the other things it's like, oh, I have to like add a romance, add like strong female character, add like historical like information. So I don't know what to make of it. I think I'll give another book a chance because I'm enjoying the Bombay-ness of it. But
see, I love historical crime and I love learning about that kind of era. So I like a good kind of Roman one. I've recently read some D.V. Bishop, which is kind of Italianish, and I have no idea what year, but I'm going to say 1500, just to take that out. And I love kind of learning about that. So this might appeal to me if he's put in the history, because he has part of the history I don't know anything about, and that's why I like to read these books. And I like crime, so put them together. It's great.
think you'll actually enjoy it. You might be put off, or someone else maybe, but like obviously the person who returned the third book in the series really enjoys the series, like is so reading, and like is like I think from Coatbridge, so might not have or may have connections with like Indian history like through ancestors, but it is obviously still accessible to people who are not super connected to India. But for me, maybe that is that I am too connected to India. Maybe that's the thing. But also that like I feel like I wanted the writing to be better. So it's not so much about anything else. It's about like literally the writing. I wish the character, like I didn't like.
You
the
would understand if it was his first book. But maybe even just being the first in the series, maybe it will develop. Maybe
it's like a genre thing as well. Like sometimes like you make connections with, like for example in fantasies, I develop much greater connections than like maybe mysteries. I'm more focused on the mystery rather than like the character. So I don't know. So I'm gonna give it a shot, and maybe I'll come back and say, oh, I love the series.
I'm gonna give it a shot as well. I have seen it on the shelf and I've just never kind of picked it up. I didn't know that it was historical.
I would like to see what you make of it, just because I was thinking that it might be difficult for somebody, but then maybe not. Maybe like it was just me. I'm like, I want you to be a better writer.
And sometimes that's the thing, when you pick up a book and you want it to be more than it is, you're more disappointed than if you didn't have anything you know, to begin with, if you know what I mean. Yeah,
for sure. And like, I don't think it was a disappointing read. It was fine in terms of the character.
Fine is a very...
But Bombay, totally loved that, yes.
Interesting.
So, like, turning from fine to dark.
Yes. So, as I say, Blake has appeared in a lot of books, none of which I have here today. However, this was the one that popped up first when I looked her up, and I thought, oh, I'll take that. It's quite an unusual cover. Obviously at home you can't see this, but it's, it doesn't really give much away at all. It's quite a nice cover actually, I think, but there you go.
Well, Masters of Death is quite a catchy title as well.
And Death is in it as a character, and his godson is in it as a character. But I'm going to read a wee bit of which I don't have my glasses on, apologies, the blurb. And it is Viola Marek, apologies for the pronunciation, is a struggling estate agent and a vampire.
Oh, yeah.
That's what caught me straight away. Our biggest issue is the house that she's selling is haunted. So already we've got scary estate agent, we've got vampire, and we've got ghost. And I was like, oh yeah, okay, this is. Basically, the ghost has been murdered in the house. It was his house, and he doesn't want her to sell his house until his death has been solved. His murder has been solved.
Okay.
So she can see him.
It's not at all what I was expecting. No.
So basically, she can see him, and she's trying to sell the house, and he keeps coming along, and like, because it's in America, Chicago, I want to say, it's different than estate agents here. There they kind of really kind of sell the house. You know, she bakes bread and all that kind of stuff, and has cookies out and cheese boards and things like that, you know, so folk come and look. And he keeps like moving things and kind of just generally being ghosty, because he doesn't want her to sell the house until this has been solved, because he doesn't remember anything. So that's happening. At the same time as Fox, which is a brilliant name for a character, Demora, son or godson of Death, is a medium, except he's not really a medium, he's a bit of a fraud. But she kind of is recommended to him by somebody else, and she thinks, well, if I can find out about the ghost's death, we can sell the house, etc, etc. Except in the background, because there's quite a lot going on in this book, there is a game that is played by the immortals, and there's only one rule: don't lose. I'm reading that off the back. So there's this kind of game, and you're not quite sure what kind of game it is, but the immortals play it because, being immortal, they get kind of bored. In this game, Death is kind of the, you know, the kind of, I don't know what the right word is here, but he's the kind of main man. So they come and speak to Death, and basically, you know, most people either don't win or they kind of come even. That something is taken off them if they lose. I'm not describing that very well because I'm trying not to spoil it too much. But basically, as they're trying to get to Fox, because he can speak to his godfather, Death goes missing. And so they can't contact him. So this troupe of vampire, ghost, fraudulent medium, and a bunch of other people, like, who eventually like come together. So not Belle at all, that's the other book, sorry, Viola, he meets other people that she didn't really know existed, like, so other kind of werewolves and sirens and people like that. They all kind of have this, you know, club, and they all kind of get involved in this. So near the end, there's quite a lot of characters all coming together, which is great because we know the characters by then. But if you're one of these people that struggle with too many characters, you're going to lose it a wee bit there. There's also angels, so there's Michael and somebody else, who kind of argue quite a lot all the time. There's the other side, so there's like demons and things like that, but they're not bad demons, they're kind of just, you know, there's just people who are just doing their job, and they're not really good or bad or whatever. But I really enjoyed it. I'm not selling it very well, but I really enjoyed it. It took a while to get into it, just because, you know, you think, all right, okay, vampire, estate agent, ghost, we're going to find out how the ghost was murdered, you know, etc, etc. But it doesn't. It keeps moving. There's also like a wee bit of a kind of love story between Fox and another character, who has sort of disappeared as well and can only come back for certain reasons, and you realise that's because of the game. He's also an immortal, obviously, and Fox is an immortal, and it was quite funny because when you first started it, you thought, oh, Fox and Viola are going to get together. No, there's other stuff happening.
I do
in the background.
Subverted expectations.
Yes, unusualness. You know, one of the demons is kind of fancies one of the angels, you know, all that kind of stuff.
Oh, good. Crossing boundaries.
Yes, There's not. It's not a love story. It's not a romantasy. You know, it's very much.
It sounds very hijinksy.
Yes, but there's this kind of dark undercurrent to it because of this kind of game that's happening, and this kind of almost dismissive of normal humans. You know,
because their lives don't matter.
This other world is happening, and you know, it's like humans are just, you know,
pawns in the game.
Yeah, they don't even like count at all. And yeah, who cares if loads of them going to die, you know, that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
It's quite dark, and as usual, because I think most books where death appears as a character, death is a good character. Not good as in good and evil, but like a solid kind of character. He's quite funny. At some points he kind of narrates it, and he's quite funny. And again, it does kind of jump a wee bit, so sometimes it's from Viola's point of view, sometimes it's from Fox's point of view, sometimes it's from you know, other points of view.
So I feel like I can see Terry Pratchett influence.
Yes, you can see she's been influenced by them.
Yeah.
She's not stolen anything from them.
No, it's like,
but she's been influenced by them.
I love the premise itself, like what you read. Like I love the idea of an estate agent like being like unable to do her job because his ghost is like harassing her, but just as like a domestic drama kind of, like a supernatural soap opera.
Yeah, exactly. And it's unusual. It's unusual. I'm going to read a bit more of the blurb, because it does tell us here. But with the help of a demonic personal trainer, a sharp-voiced angel, and a love-stricken reaper. So we have reapers and things like that, who, you know, all that kind of stuff. And eventually they go to the game, basically, to find out where death is. There's also a kind of ancient baddie in the background who's kind of manipulating everybody and trying to get all this to kind of to work out. So some of it is quite quirky, and you know, it's not, I'm sure there's a lot darker fantasy books out there, so it's not totally dark.
Oh, that's good, because I'm not a fan of grim dark.
No, it's not grim. It has a good ending.
That's good. And is it a standalone?
It has an ending, yes. If she brought back some of the characters, I wouldn't say no. But it does stand alone. It kind of finishes.
Oh, you've totally sold me on this.
And as I say, Death is a great character in it. And like when he's talking, like him and his godson both wear an elastic band around their wrist, and when they swear, they snap the elastic band. You know, there's wee touches like that, and it's interesting to see how Death kind of learns from his godson, who's human, and how, although he's immortal, you know, he's also human, and how Fox kind of learns stuff from, and then how the other characters see Death, you know, from their point of view and things like that. I really enjoyed it. I've got our other book, the Atlas 6. Out just now. I've not started it. That seems to be her bigger book. It's just this one kind of came
Is this
up
her
first.
newer book?
I don't know, and I'm not going to.
Okay.
I think so.
Yeah, I'll definitely add it to my list.
Yeah.
Do you want to give an elevator pitch for your third secret book?
I don't know.
Or do you want to talk about it more in like for another episode? Do you love it? First, like say, do you love it or do you hate it?
I love it.
Okay,
which
so
is
then
why
maybe
we want it.
Yes. So then maybe we do want. I'm making the decision for you. I asked you a question. I'm like, no.
I'll give you a wee hint, and then we'll stop.
Yes.
So the reason that I love it is because of one of the characters. Okay. One of the characters is a cat. Oh. And if you're a cat person at all, you will totally understand the character. Jim Butcher, the author, obviously is a cat person. Yeah. And totally writes the cat immaculately.
Is the cat a big character?
It has, yes.
Oh,
yes.
I'm sold on
and
it.
It's a proper cat. So that's all I'm going to tell you.
Oh, that's a very tantalizing hint. Well, hopefully the next time, I don't know what B has in store for us next. I know you know, and maybe you're going to be able to put a cat themed book into it.
Yes, because
excellent. Perfect.
And this is kind of giving it away for next episode. Yeah. The next episode is Natural World.
Oh, perfect.
And a cat. I can squeeze that in somewhere.
Yes. And what is natural to some is not natural to others. So I think a cat and the sword wielding pirate.
Yes. There are pirates in it.
It's a part of the natural world.
Yes. So. That's me sorted for next episode.
Well, I can't wait to hear more about this cat specifically, and maybe that guy on the cover, I guess. Mostly the cat. Can you tell us, can we end the episode with the cat's name?
Yes, we can, but with my germs, I'm probably not going to say it very well.
Okay.
But he's called Raoul. So ROWL,
Oh.
as in yowl, which
Okay.
your cat would do.
Yeah.
Rowl. So not Raoul, which is what I've called them throughout the whole book.
Yeah, no.
Raoul.
I love that name.
Yes.
Just like Fox. Very good name
Yes,
for a protagonist,
yes.
especially a feline protagonist.
Yes.
Well, hopefully you've enjoyed listening to our light and dark books, and we'll see you again next time.
Bye.
Bye.